Welcome back, everyone. My name is Holden Prio, and thank you so much for joining us here at the tEDH Tournament Competitive Commander Magic the Gathering channel. Today, I'm joined by a special guest, Nate. And before we jump into his introduction, I just want to give a really quick shout out to anybody who's new here or just coming across this channel for the first time. We do all sorts of different deep dive videos, longer form content, also short form memes and Commander, cEDH, Magic in general memes, and reels and that kind of stuff. And the longer form content, we'll do interviews as they relate to different types of like deck experts as well as new decks that we're trying to brew. And my background is all different types of 60 card format Magic, Pauper, Vintage, Legacy, Modern, and Pioneer. And I've come over into cEDH only as recently as 2023, in the beginning of 2023, and what I've been doing in the format since, and kind of my exploration of this process and what tournament EDH really looks like, and kind of getting into the nitty gritty around that. So I'd love to welcome you here. I'm really glad that you're here to join us today. And without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Nate. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the content that you do and kind of your background in Magic?
Yeah, no, totally. My background in Magic is definitely not as extensive. I am mainly just a Commander guy. I got into the Commander, I don't know, probably about 5 years ago. Didn't really
Nice.
start getting into actual, I don't know, cEDH probably till about 2 years after that. It might have been shorter than that, but I've been playing cEDH for probably good 2 or 3 years at this point. I am 1/3 of a group called Turning Point Meta. That's actually how me and Holden actually ended up contacting and actually like getting involved with each other, because I think I shouted you out in a video,
Yeah.
and then you saw the video, and then we hopped in Discord and we started chatting. We kind of made some collab videos, and now here we are.
Awesome. Yeah, just
So
real quick, I can't shout your channel out enough. It's awesome. I've seen it really kind of grow in such a really cool way. All of you guys over there are doing awesome things, and also your tournament coverage and your live paper coverage, and some of the cool things that you've been doing around like starting the discourse around trying to build the community in a better way and trying to curb things like collusion and bribery. Like all the stuff that you've done has been super badass. So really props. The channel's super sick, and anybody who hasn't checked it out, please go check it out. I'll put a little logo here, and also I'll put the channel link in the description below. So either pause this and go over there, make sure you subscribe and like their content, check it out, or afterwards go do it. But one way or the other, you got to get over there for sure.
appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's something that we wanted to focus on. With something that we kind of saw as a whole. That's something that wasn't really seen. It wasn't really talked about. Like everyone talks about tournament play, but you don't really see it. So
Right.
that's kind of what we wanted to capitalize on, and it's been working out well for us. But and then as far as like brewing goes, I kind of feel the same way you do, Holden. Like some people are like, "Oh, you're so creative. Oh, how do you do it?" Like when it comes to like Ragged Dragon, but I'm just a dude who likes decks. Like
Yeah.
I just think it's fun, and that's all I'm here to do. That is all I'm here to do, is just build some fun stuff, try fun things, and I do the best that I can. So here we are.
Well, your best is pretty good, man. I love the stuff that you're doing, and we always have a great time working on video content, or even just in your Discord. I'm a frequent. I frequent your Discord all the time, and I'm in there like kind of chopping it up with you guys about the different things that you're working on or videos that come out, that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
so this kind of what spurred me to want to reach out and just do a kind of quick, let's call it like a brainstorm or brew session, a little bit more off the cuff. So I've done some of these with some other people in the past, but this one was like kind of no real prep or guidance ahead of time, and more of like, hey, let's talk about a deck that I brewed up originally, and it was one that I know, or at least I think that you've played before and you had interest in, and that it was one of the ones that kind of caught your attention. But now quite a bit of time has gone by since I originally brewed it. A bunch of bans have happened, and then the meta has shaken up. We've got new cards into the format, and quite a bit of changes along the way. And I'll keep bearing the lead for one more second so that our viewer will stay with us. If you made it
Of
this
course.
far and you're interested at all in WoW Storm cEDH content, separate from what we'll be talking about today, please join the Discord. Links will be below, also in my Moxfield profile here. And if you want to connect with me on Blue Sky or here on YouTube, like, subscribe, reach out to me on Blue Sky. I'm always open for conversations. I love collaborating with people in the community, or just, say hi. It's always nice to connect with people. So let's get back to the topic at hand. The one, the only, the Dune popcorn bucket. That's right. We're back here once again talking about Geralf, the flesh right, and
not that.
yeah, and Geralf is a spicy one. So real quick for anybody who's maybe listening along and isn't familiar with Geralf, because it isn't necessarily like a staple, a great way to think about this is a legendary mono blue monastery mentor in the command zone. So this is 2 and a blue for a legendary human warlock. It's a 2/3. It came out from the Outlaws of Thunder Junction set, and it says whenever you cast a spell, notably during your turn, other than the first spell that turn, you create a 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature token. Very important that it is blue, which we'll talk about later for cards that have Convoke, for example. And whenever a zombie enters the battlefield, so one of these tokens, for example, under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it for each other zombie that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. So, for example, let's say the first spell you cast for turn is Geralf, and the second spell you cast for turn, let's just say, is a Ponder. You cast the Ponder. With the Ponder on the stack, there's a cast trigger, and that trigger says, oh, this is not the first spell for turn. We're going to make a token. It's a 2/2, and then that token enters, and it will trigger to see whether or not other zombies have entered the battlefield that turn, and you'll put that many +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number that have come before it. So you can see how this could grow very quickly. And so I'm very curious from your perspective, Nate, as someone who I believe has at the very least like tested out the deck and brewed with it a little bit or played with it. What has your experience been like with it, or why is it interesting to you, or like why is it even worth exploring again?
The reason that I really enjoy this deck is because I feel like it attacks from an angle that a lot of people are not prepared for. Initially, people seem to think that Geralf is just there as, as he's just a little bit of extra value. But then people think, well, you're in mono blue. I mean, what are you going to do with a bunch of zombies in mono blue? It's like, that just doesn't make any sense. And a lot of people definitely underestimate how quickly your board can get out of hand when it comes to Geralf. The amount of times, like, I'm like almost sad because like I love the tokens because I actually grabbed like a bunch of the zombie rogues that he makes.
Yeah, yep.
You can't get enough.
No,
You'd have to have like 100 of these freaking things in order to keep up.
That's so funny that you say that. I gotta interrupt you for 1 second because when I played
please.
Ral, I originally was going to, and I'm still doing it, but I'm collecting the actual Magic card Stormcrow to represent Storm for turn. But it's a similar thing in playing Ral. Storm gets so out of proportion that I think I have like 30 or so Stormcrows at this point, but Storm gets up to 40, 50, 60, whatever. So like there's never enough. So I know what you're saying because that was actually the problem I ran into with Geralf as well. I have some of the old school Christopher Rush, like OG unglued, like completely textless zombie tokens. Like I have 2 of the OG ones, and I have a bunch of other cool zombie tokens. People would like give them to me at tournaments and that kind of stuff, and it's still not enough. Like I must have like 30 or 40 of them, still not enough. Because you can make 100, 200 of these freaking zombies in a turn when you start churning and going off.
Oh yeah, it's so easy to do, and like again, it's just people are not expecting you to do something like that because most people that are playing against something that's mono blue, they're typically used to like your Urzas. They're typically used to, gosh, name another freaking mono blue commander. I can't even think of very many to be honest.
Like the Planeswalker Teferi or something like that. Yeah.
But a lot of those ones they're like, hey, let's take our time. Let's put out a stacks piece. Let's put out like a vexing bauble or a counterbalance and things like that.
Back to basics, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas this deck, people are like, what does it do? And you're like, oh, it just makes zombies. It's okay, it just makes zombies. And then you start storming off in mono blue and go, can I see your commander like one more time? Just like real quick. You're like, yeah, sure, go for it, man. And you're like, so you're just making zombies with him? Yep, just making zombies with him, man.
Just making zombies. All of a sudden, promise I'm not the threat.
Oh my gosh! And then you get down like a Jason Bright or a Danny Pink. You just start drawing cards and then casting spells and drawing cards and casting spells and you energy tap, and it's so much fun to storm in in a mono color that doesn't typically isn't seen as something that typically is supposed to storm off. It's usually combined with another color.
So you
So I
just
find it
mentioned
very
two
interesting.
cards that for sure everybody listening and watching to this video would just know by heart, I know. But
Oh, of
just
course, of
in
course.
case there's someone new that hasn't heard of cEDH All-Star, Jesus Christ, it's Jason Bourne, Jason Bright, Glowing Prophet. Let's just give a quick rundown. This is a 3-mana legend, super cool from the Fallout set. It's a zombie itself, which is pretty notable. So it's a zombie mutant advisor. It's a 2/3. It says whenever a zombie or a mutant you control dies, if its power was different from its base power, draw a card. And then it also has like a OK sack outlet on it that gives things +1/+1 counter and flying. So you could pay 2, sack a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control against flying until end of turn. So what's important about this is there are times when you just need a death trigger in this deck to trigger other things to like continue to go off, and this could be the outlet to make that happen. But the really important one is whenever a zombie or a mutant you control dies, so in this case a zombie, if its power was different than its base power, draw a card. That's insane. That means every spell you cast beyond the one that makes the first zombie, every new one that you cast could represent also drawing a card. So you could start to see how and why this would work. So the first one would be a 2/2. The second one would come into play. It would be a 2/2 that it would trigger and see that the first zombie has come into play. So you put a +1/+1 counter on it. Now its power is different from its base power, and so therefore it's applicable to trigger Jason Bright to draw a card. Why is this so important that Jason Bright itself is a zombie? Well, twofold. One, when it comes into play, the second part of Geralf triggers itself because he's a zombie, so he enters the battlefield under your control. So you put a +1/+1 counter on it for each other zombie. So it triggers itself, which is always nice. But the really big one is what are we naming for Roaming Throne? Well, you can name human, which means that you're going to get multiple of the uh, triggers for more than one zombie coming into play from Geralf. But the other crazy thing is you don't have to. You can name zombie, which then means that when the zombie enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. But Jason Bright now, when the zombie dies, draws you 2 cards. So you get like all these 6 synergies. And then also, we were talking about Danny Pink. Danny Pink is a little bit
Oh
more
yeah,
expensive, and this card's just insane. And
so correct.
this is essentially just like a I win button. It's so funny when I was playing this deck in my locals, people would be like, "Fuck Danny Pink!" Like I would put this card on the
He's
stack, and they
so
would just
good,
be like,
dude. He's
"We got to
so
counter this.
good.
We got to counter this card." So it's 3 and a blue for a legendary creature, human soldier advisor. So of note, if you were to name human on Roaming Throne, this would work for both Geralf, sorry, and Danny Pink. It has Mentor, which is a triggered ability, so that can also trigger off Roaming Throne twice, and it's a 4/3. Excuse me. And it says creatures you control have. I don't know if that sounds familiar to you, Nadu. Anybody? Creatures you control have. Whenever one or more counters are put on this creature for the first time each turn, draw a card. Which means every single zombie that comes into play just draws you a card beyond the first one, of course. That is so insane. So this is just zombies come into play, they draw you cards, and then Jason Bright is zombies leave play and they draw you cards. So you're drawing a lot of cards in this deck. So how do you keep
Oh,
the
easy.
mana going? Is the big thing that a lot of times you get kind of choked at. At least that was my experience. Like you got to get some sort of mana engine going because you have cards like Sidisi's Faithful, Shrieking Drake, Dreamstalker. These are all cards that you can like cast and bounce themselves over and over again. And people know these from other formats. These are infinite loops. So similarly, these just cost a bunch of mana and they do the thing. So how do we get the mana going? Let's jump down a little bit further and talk about some of our favorite sacrifice outlets out there. We have Ashnod's Altar, which this is I believe it's a Japanese version. I'm not 100% sure. This
I
is,
believe that's the Japanese. Yes.
yeah, this is one of the like foreign promos. But this card is a 3-mana artifact that has a mana ability on it that just says sacrifice a creature, make 2 colorless mana. And then Phyrexian Altar is essentially the identical same card, except for instead of adding 2 colorless mana, you add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Altar of Dementia, of note, is similar, but instead of mana, it mills target player equal to the sacrifice creature's power. So what does this really mean? This means that if you get enough creatures in play, first of all, you can just kill with power on board, right? Second of all, if you want to kill that turn, you can Altar of Dementia the entire table down so that they have no cards left in hand. And that might seem like a tall order, but it's not because you have 40 power and 50 power zombies. So you just sack a couple of them and you instantly mill the table. and then you resolve a windfall, and the table dies, and you live because they have nothing to draw off of. The other thing you could do, though, is you can just keep making mana with these mana outlets. And as you're making the mana, each time you sacrifice a zombie, you draw a card of Jason Bright. So you're like drawing cards, making mana, drawing cards, making mana, and eventually you get to this point where you're just storming the hell off in your deck. And what's kind of nutty about all of that is you kind of just get to this eventuality in the deck where like you're just going to draw through everything. You're going to cast a temporal trespass or a savor the moment, take an extra turn, and then crack the table with damage, or you're going to resolve a Mind's Desire for Storm is 20 or 30 or whatever, and then just cast all the cards in your deck. You can also make infinite mana using Dramatic Reversal, Icecrown Scepter, while having where is it? While having Grand Architect in play. So you can tap an untapped blue creature you control to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool, spend that mana only to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifacts. So this means that if you tap a single zombie, or the Grand Architect itself, you can use that mana to fuel the ISO Rev. And then that in and of itself is infinite untaps. And so if you just have one other thing in play that wants you to be tapping or untapping, or if you have some other outlet to use all of that artifact mana, notably into literally any of the artifacts in the deck that you're going to draw into, it's another really nice outlet to have. On top of lots of other very, very cool synergistic things, cards like Chain of Vapor and Repeal end up just being like these pseudo rituals, hidden strings, an offer you can't refuse, snap, frantic search, gush. I mean, these are all ways to kind of like rebuy lands or pseudo ritual. And now I've talked too much. I'm very excited about this deck. So it's really fun to come
you're
back
totally
to.
fine. No, this deck is an absolute blast. It's just like I said, it just attacks on such an interesting angle. I will say that it feels like most of the time my wins actually came from getting Dramatic Reversal and Isochron Scepter down. A lot of my
Oh,
wins came
nice.
from that, and a lot of my wins came from Phyrexian Altar.
Yeah.
And that was something that I kind of was wanting to talk to you about as far as any choke points that you feel like you found. And I don't know about you, but for me, at least I didn't play it a ton, but I did play it quite a bit. I played it enough to feel like I had a general idea. And the one thing that I felt like I was choked on, and maybe you have an idea, is I felt like I made colorless mana really, really, really well. But then when I got to my colored mana, sometimes things got a little bit shaky.
For sure. So
And
I
so,
agree. And what I've started to think about from this perspective is that I didn't used to be on the intruder alarm sort of package. But since playing when I left off with this deck last, I actually brought this to Fishbowl 4 and I like narrowly missed top 16 with this deck, as
oh,
insane as that is.
hey,
Like
that's good though.
I like the game I needed to win in or like my winning into top 16 was or top 16 or top 30. I have to go back and look. But my way to continue on into the next round, I think maybe it wasn't. It was just I needed to continue on to the next round to give me a chance. Was a pod where I had a win on board and I stormed off and bounced every single permanent in board, like including lands from the entirety of all players. And there was only about 5 minutes left on the clock, and all 3 players, every single one of us needed a win. If we took a draw, we all lost. No one progressed forward. And we had this conversation
Oh,
pregame, and I presented an on-board win assuming we can go back to my turn and I can attack. And
mm,
all they did was run out the clock, like turn after each of the turns over the
oh,
course of the next 5 minutes. So they had 0 permanents in play. So they like went to their turn, played a fetch land, crack a fetch land, look through their library, find a surveil land, trigger their surveil, like just going step by step. Can I take a look at your graveyard? Like all that stuff. And I was just the whole time I was like,
you're like, please.
if we draw, we all lose. Like, come on. Like, seriously, like, I would rather, at this point, I mean, I'd get disqualified for saying this, but like, I'd rather like flip a coin and like just give somebody the win. Like, the fact that we are
Right,
all
yeah, but
going
I
to
get what you're
lose
saying.
is psychotic. Like, cEDH players, though, can't fix them. And
No,
there's not a whole lot you can say to some people. So that's totally fine. Definitely didn't want to take a draw there, but it's the table just forced that to happen, and I was like, okay, well, I guess
right.
none of us go on forward, so that's one way to do it.
Okay, and then that wasn't my call, but all right, sounds good.
Yeah,
It
part of the
happens. It
deal.
happens.
But anyway, so I wasn't on the Intruder Alarm package, and I think it's pretty powerful. So for those who don't know, Intruder Alarm is a 3-mana enchantment that says creatures don't untap during their controller's untap phases. So it sounds like a stacks piece, and you could use it that way, I guess, but it isn't really in a 4-player game because anytime any creature comes into play, including your opponents, untap all creatures, including your opponents and your own. So this is an interesting card to bring into this deck, along with the addition of Leyline of Transformation, which is essentially just like Arcane Adaptation or Masquerade Nexus, but in a Leyline form. So it's a pre-game action where you could start the game with all of your creatures of the chosen creature type. So you could make every single creature in the deck a zombie or a human, depending on which way you wanted to go, based off of like what your hand composition looked like, to be able to do like absolutely bonkers shenanigans. Or you can make every creature in your deck a wizard, which then means that you have one of the choke points, in my opinion, is being able to find the right cards. And so you get to then all of a sudden use really powerful tutors like Step Through. And so now you can just wizard cycle for whatever creature you need to then go off. Like you can find one of your copies. You can find one of like your Gilded Drake sort of effects. You can find your Grand Architect to make mana, or your Shrieking Drake as an engine, or the Thoracle to go for the win, or the Jason Bright to be a card draw, or the Displacer Kitten to be another engine, or the Roaming Throne to double triggers, etc. So even Subtlety to find interaction at instant speed uncounterably, which is like pretty psycho. So I really like that interaction, and I added that. And then the other powerful thing that I think it was missing previously, also added in Unstoppable Plan as a way to going to your end step, not feeling as shields down. So you can like storm off, go to your end step, and still untap and like hold up a couple like counter spells or whatever. But the mana problem you were talking about, I actually do think was solved right as I was leaving the deck. So Bloomburrow came out, 3-Tree City. As it enters, you choose a creature type, you tap, you add colorless, and then it has basically the Nykthos effect, except for instead of for devotion, it's for a number of creatures that are that you control of that type. And you make the mana of whatever that color is. So you choose a color, you add that amount of mana equal to the number of creatures you control of the chosen type. It's essentially Gaia's Cradle, except you have to pay 2 into it, and you get mana of any color equals the number of creatures of that type. So that's another reason why cards like Leyline of Transformation and Masquerade Nexus are just like bonkers in this deck. So now imagine if you have Intruder Alarm and you have like 3-Tree City and you like are kind of set up to go off. That's where cards like Fate Stitcher that just untaps any permanent now just instantly go infinite in the deck, because it itself, every time you cast a creature, so like if you have a Shrieking Drake, you cast a Shrieking Drake, it untaps Fate Stitcher because of Intruder Alarm, and then you tap it to untap your 3-Tree City, and then and again, this is making a new zombie each time you do this, and then with that cast on the stack, the new zombie comes into play, and that will untap the Fate Stitcher again, and then you tap it again, so every creature every spell you cast is untapping your huge mana dump. Like essentially, like you got to think about like every spell you cast is untapping your Guy's Cradle. Basically, it's almost like a Rog Thras sort of style. The way that they're building some of their decks right now. So I'm not sure if you've kind of seen some of these changes I've made, and if you haven't, what are your thoughts? Like what comes to mind?
Yeah, no, see, the 3-Tree City was definitely one that when I saw it the first time, I was like, that is an absolute. I'm so glad they printed that card, especially for a deck like this. Because, like I said, one of the biggest choke points for me specifically was the blue mana. I made colorless like there's no tomorrow, but blue was always odd until you found like a Phyrexian Altar, right? Because then you could just do Shrieking Drake loops. You just cast a Shrieking Drake over and over again. You make a zombie over and over again. You sack all the, everything to the Phyrexian Altar, you're good to go. And I was always trying to find a Phyrexian Altar. And so I was, there was a chance that I was like, man, should I run like Fabricate in this deck? Should I be running like Whir of Invention and some of like these other pieces in order to like get these pieces directly onto the board? I considered a couple of those. I think I tested Fabricate and I wasn't a big fan of it.
Yeah. I think some more of the mid-range hell stuff is probably, I think, safer. What I mean by that is like the Mirror Maids and the copy artifacts, like that kind of stuff. And also, you'll notice I have Clever Impersonator in here now as well. Like, I think those effects are like a bit more powerful because they're not as commander reliant. Like someone just slams a Ristic and then you just copy it. Like even if you aren't able to do your thing and you're not able to set up and somebody's like, I don't know, like, countered your Displacer Kitten or your Jason Bright, your engine piece, or they Mindbreak Trapped or exiled your Shrieking Drake or whatever, fine. You still just copied the Ristic and you can just kind of grind, and you're still a blue deck. So you have like a metric fuck ton of counter spells. So you get to do that thing. But another thing that I will mention that it wasn't a strategy you could do before is you can also now use Manamo as a way to untap 3 Tree City. So this is not infinite, but it is a way to like just pop off with it as well. And on top of that, the other really powerful thing is that Treasure Vault itself is an artifact, which is insane with Grand Architect, because that means every
Cool.
creature can now untap your Treasure Vault, or not untap, it can dump. Every creature represents 1 treasure for Treasure Vault because it adds 2 colorless mana that can only be spent to activate the abilities or cast artifact spells. So what that means is then you can tap a creature and it dumps 2 mana into Treasure Vault, essentially creating 1 treasure token for every creature you tap. So that's why you can like storm off a decent amount with a Treasure Vault in hand and a grand Architect or whatever, and not go crazy. Have 6 zombies, whatever. Go to the next turn and play your Grand Architect, play your Treasure Vault, and boom, instantly just like make 10 treasures out of nowhere. And the ramp is just like that. And you're not, the Grand Architect is not something you really counter when you see it on the stack, because it's not that scary if you don't have some sort of outlet like a Walking Ballista or whatever. And I've had people ask me like, "Oh, you just got a Walking Ballista me?" I'm like, "Actually, don't even play that card in my deck." Like, and
Oh,
it's
and I had I had people ask me the same question. Sorry, I'm plugging in the
no, you're
headphones because
fine.
apparently they're having some problem. But like I had people ask me the same thing. They're like, "Oh, well, why not just run a Walking Ballista, as your finisher?" Because I feel like what you're doing right now is like convoluted. I'm like, okay, well, say I'm in a game and I'm not popping off at the moment, and I draw a Walking Ballista. What the hell am I going to do with a Walking Ballista? You know what I mean? Like it doesn't. It's not human
It's a
synergy.
very
It's not
very low
zombie
impact
synergy.
card. Yeah.
Exactly, and I'm very much on the same pace with you. I never put Walking Ballista in the deck. Like even when I could make infinite mana, I'm just like, no, I'll find a different way to go about it. I already have infinite mana. I might as well use it. So I agree with you 100% on the Walking Ballista call because I don't like having walk. If I can avoid Walking Ballista, I try not to run it in my lists
Yeah, same.
unless it makes 100% sense.
I think the only decks that really make sense are like super, super deep on the infinite mana strategy that are also
Yeah.
already very artifact centric, like maybe an Urza list or like a reality trip deck or like something like that. But those are kind of the only ones. And even then, like you'd have to really convince me why you want to play that card because I agree it's pretty dead. But yeah, we're on Thoracle, so we can, and which is now
Yeah.
completely tutorable by our step through because it's already a wizard. And there's also a bunch of these cards are just wizards, like already. Like Fate Stitcher just happens to already be a wizard, which is like kind of nice. And then also now we got Harbinger of the Seas, so which is also a wizard and is a pretty impactful card in the current meta, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
Polywog Prodigy was also a really big upgrade for this deck. Polywog Prodigy was kind of like like I was not super happy. I thought this card was being sick when it first was spoiled, and then it hasn't done
Same.
amazing things in my opinion. But this is one of the few decks where it's actually good because you can immediately trigger it in multiple ways. Like so many of the creatures in this deck just have like 3/4 power or whatever, and also it just happens to get immediately triggered by a zombie coming into play. So you like always go at least up to the next step up to going to 2 power. So everything 1 or less now, which is a lot of interaction, right? Like Silence, Demonic
Oh yeah.
Consultation, Flusterstorm, like so many of those cards are just going to trigger, which is really, really good. Being able to play at flash speed with Valley Floodcaller and High Fate Trickster sort of cards is pretty powerful. And this is also a wizard. So I wasn't 100% sure if I should put in High Fate Trickster or not. And like how worth it is it? Like it's kind of hard to fully know. And the slots are starting to get a little bit tight. So what I would ask, I guess, is looking at the list right now, at least in my opinion, looking at the list right now, I feel like Copy Artifact is a card that is cuttable for sure.
Sure.
It's a little bit narrow, and I'm comfortable cutting this. I think the mana base is exactly where I actually want it, and it's pretty well tuned, and it's pretty
I
powerful.
agree.
I think
Yeah. I agree
it's
100%.
clean. Um, the real big question I guess I have is like, is this a Candelabra of Tuanos deck? Like, are we that all in and we should be playing like Expedition Map and Candelabra of Tuanos and like actually trying to tutor up and find those like this land
I
every time? And I don't know, like this is a
Right.
playtesting thing for me. So
Well, and the thing is you already have Urza Saga in your mana base, right?
yeah,
So
that's true.
if you did want, if you did want to start leaning on the expedition map thing, it's not necessarily a bad call, right? To go get your essentially your Gaia's Cradle in blue, which in some instances is actually better than a freaking like it's such a good card. The amount of zombies you make, I think I want people to understand how many zombies you can make in this deck. It's insane.
Yeah, it's
But yeah,
hard
so
to
like you
fathom until
technically,
you see it pop off.
oh yeah, it's insane. So I don't know if I necessarily hate the idea of that. Because like I said, you already have your Urza Saga in here, whether it gets mana or whether it gets your expedition maps, you can go get your 3 tree city.
Yeah, but
You
it could also
could lean
get
onto
Treasure
that.
Vault too. That's actually, now that I think about it, you could
That
get,
is yes.
or you could get
Yep.
Otawara if you need interaction. Like, so it's like somewhat multifunctional. So that is nice.
Sure. Um, so, oh no, I don't think that would be a good inclusion. For a second, I wanted to say Moon Silver Key. I don't think that's good.
Moonsilver Key was in the
So
original list because of Phyrexian Altar.
okay,
Like, and it also
that makes
gets
sense.
you Machine God Effigy because this is a mana ability, so you could find a clone with Moonsilver Key, which is like very unexpected. People like don't really see that coming.
Okay, there's that thought there. Um, there are times where I actually did consider putting Altar of the Brood in my list.
Yeah,
Running alongside of Urza Saga because it like kind of sets you up, put it onto the battlefield, and then you storm off, and then everyone just loses their library. You don't even have to worry
yeah,
that much about it. But I also understand that its floor can be a little bit unimpactful.
for sure. Yeah, it can be a little bit rough. This card did insane things for me when I cast it, but it felt very Widmore. This Nano Gene conversion. It's just a four
Yes.
mana sorcery. Choose a target creature you control. Each other creature becomes a copy of that creature until end of turn, except it isn't legendary. So in this situation, you just choose Geralf, and every one of your zombies, which normally you have like 10, 15, 20, 50, whatever, they all become Geralf, but they keep their +1/+1 counters, and they're not legendary. So then the next spell you cast just triggers like 50 triggers on top of each other. They all land, and they all see each other. They all trigger. Get like that in and of itself is just like it's very like saffron olive, like
Yes.
like MTG
It's very,
Goldfish,
very fun, very
yeah,
over the top, but it's like,
yeah,
is this worth it though in the long run?
yeah.
And I do agree because I actually ran this. I actually ran Nanogene conversion in a Eurico list that I was working
Oh,
on,
cool.
and it felt very much the same way. Where it's like, yes, this is good, but is this necessary? And I ended up cutting it as well. So I
Hard to
do
know.
understand.
The other thing I would say too is that Merchant Scroll stocks went way up since the printing of Sink Into Stupor. So now
I
Merchant
agree 100.
Scroll
percent
can also just get you a land. Like that's like it just raised the floor of that card. Like I put
Yes.
this into Rao. Like this actually made its way into Rao now. So uh yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of cards that are like so close on the considering pile. Also, I beat someone in a game with this card in Fishbowl, Disrupt. I won a game using Disrupt. This is a terrible Magic card. It's a single blue counter
Oh, I
target instant or
love this stupid
sorcery
card.
unless its caster pays one. So it's a force spike, but only for instants or sorceries. And then it just says draw a card. Like this card's garbage, but you need in this deck. I found you need cards that like keep replacing themselves. Like you just need dumb cantrips. Are you noticing a theme here, anybody? I like to play decks where the spells themselves don't matter, but the commanders just win the game on their own. um,
Yup.
so, okay, so we got 103 cards in the deck as is. I
Okay.
like this Intruder Alarm package. I like Mirror Maid. I like Unstoppable Plan
Agreed.
as like this kind of grindy backup plan and the Clever Impersonator. I actually, I think there's a world where like I think maybe the artifact package is pretty clean overall. I think it's possible that we actually don't care as much about playing into Flash, and so maybe Valley Flood Caller isn't actually as good in this list. And I'm sure there's like a million people out there screaming like, "You're an idiot! Valley Flood Caller is like the craziest thing. It's the best thing since sliced bread." But it's important to remember that Geralf only triggers on your turn.
Your turn.
I mean, it's hard for me to want to make a case for this. And yeah,
Yeah, I'd have to say that I agree because even when I had because I also did some Flash stuff with my version of the list. And don't get me wrong, like our versions were very similar,
yeah,
but every time because I had Valley Flood Caller in hand a couple times, and it never felt like it was going to do anything for me because I could sit there and think to myself, oh yeah, sure, I can flash out some mana or I can flash. So it's like setting up for my next turn rather than flashing it in, winning on my turn. That never came up. So then I thought to myself, okay, well then is it really worth it having this? And the same thing with High Fate Trickster, right? Like
Yeah.
High Fate Trickster is, all cards have flash, sure, but again, when Geralf only triggers on your turn, and a lot of your win lines are kind of, not all of them, but a lot of them are basing on the fact that you're making a zombie, which then translates into mana or card draw. It's hard to justify not making those zombies in order to start fueling some of those engines.
Right. Yeah, and we are a very commander centric deck. I mean, a big part of the reason why I set the deck
Mhm.
down initially was because um, losing Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt, I was very tunnel vision that like that was just going to completely stop
Uh-huh.
the deck from working. And I think now that things have settled, I don't know that it. I mean, it obviously hits the deck, but I don't know. Like, I think where the meta is at right now, like creature beats are just good. Like, if you could just
Yes.
put a bunch of power on board and then play a bunch of like Ristics and Mystics and clever impersonators and mirror maids and whatever, you can just win the game that way.
Hmm.
Like, you don't have to storm off. And so I think in that case, maybe so let's try this. So we'll
Sure,
cut
sure.
to the sideboard the Valley Flood Caller. We got to find two more cuts, and I think if we're doing that, I think Harbinger of the Seas is really solid. I like this creature package. I
Yes.
like having a cheap clone, and
Anything, Esper Sentinel, Ragavan. Yeah, I love Mockingbird.
yeah, it's pretty nice. I'm really liking the Gilded Drake effect in a deck like this because you can just steal somebody's Drannith or whatever is like holding you down from casting
Yes,
your Geralf
absolutely.
or Geralf. Gosh, I've always said it the other way, and I know it's wrong, but I just
It's,
like forget.
I know you're right. It's fine. People on the internet are gonna say what they want to
Yeah,
say.
the internet. It's a safe place.
No, it's a
Um,
great place. Great place.
so I think all of these cards are pretty solid too in the sorcery slot. This is feels really tight. I mean, I guess there's an argument that Step Through isn't as good, but in my opinion, it's just like it finds a lot of the cards you need,
It finds too much in order to not be good.
and now that we have this package with Maskwood Nexus and Leyline of Transformation, like it's pretty solid. Um,
You know,
I think yeah, we like the mana base, we like the enchantments. Founding the Third Path has been insane for me. Yeah, all these are good. Artifacts are pretty solid. So I guess if we look in the instance, is there anything obvious that feels cuttable? Not really.
not yeah, not amazing. Like
I think we got to go to creatures because everything else is like pretty tight. I mean, I
yeah,
guess
because like
maybe
the only
imposter
argument
mech.
that I would have, yeah, I could see Imposter Mech. Um,
Because there's so
but
many
man, sometimes if you hit
Thrasioses
the right,
and whatever that other devoted druids around that as a
yeah,
reminder when you play this
exactly.
it makes infinite mana instantly. And same thing with
Yeah,
machine gods, I
exactly.
would see.
And if you already have like a dramatic reversal like line going off and you're already making infinite colorless, and then you're like, oh, okay, cool. Here's my imposter mech. It's a Thrasios. I'm gonna draw my entire deck now. And
Right,
then
yeah.
usually everyone goes, cool, we'll scoop it up.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like it's hard to like. Yes, I see why it could be on the chopping block, but I just think it's too good in the meta that we are in currently. I
Yeah.
could see that if we started shifting away from these Thrasios devoted druid things, that imposter mech comes out.
Yeah.
But I think the way that it is now, I see a Thrasios in every freaking pod that I'm in.
Dude, they're
Nothing wrong
everywhere.
with Thrasios players. I don't get me wrong, Thrasios players. I'm not trying to upset you. But it's you do see them, so I don't. It's hard to cut that. In the instance, gosh, it's so hard. Like the only thing I would even consider is maybe three steps, but I think it's too good. I think it's too good because not only can you make copies of creatures that you control, so like you make a copy of your displacer kitten, or
Yeah.
you make a copy of your defiler of dreams, and so now you have that access, doubled
God.
up, or
Yeah. That
or
card's
your
insane. Being able to
roaming
pay
throne.
Phyrexian mana for your
Exact,
permanence is so wild. Plus drawing all those cards.
exact. Yep. So it's like I can't, like I would even argue that in the instance, there's a chance that we could get away with the flare of denial now. Um,
Oh. Wait. But
yeah,
it's non-token. But still, we play a
it
lot
is
of
a
creatures.
non-token,
No, I think
but
you're
when you
right.
play
I
a,
think
you know what I mean?
yeah, I think actually that is solid because there are plenty of times where I would once I've started storming off and then I put like a very important spell in the stack, like a wheel, or I go to mana drain my own large thing so I can make Moran and continue to go, or I
Right.
put one of these creature engines on the stack like a Displacer Kitten. Someone goes to counter it. Sure, I'll sack my Geralf to flare just so I can get that card
Right.
through because I'm gonna make enough mana to then be able to recast it anyways.
They just recast Geralf, or you could have something like you could be storming in the middle of it, and you're like your Fate Stitcher has already done what it needs to do, and then you sacrifice it to the Flare of Denial, and then unearth it, and then retap it, and like there's a lot of synergy in just that alone as well. That
Yeah,
I think it's good to have.
for sure. we're supposed to be cutting cards, Nate. Come on.
I know. I'm sorry.
Doesn't
I'm
this
sorry. I'm
ever?
sorry.
This is what happens to like every person who tries
I,
brewing a deck,
I,
and to, at least for me, I'm
oh,
always like, oh yeah, what about this card? Oh yeah. Okay.
ooh, ooh.
All right.
Okay.
Really looking
Gosh,
here.
this is rough.
Okay, let's leave it like this. I think
Okay.
trying to rush this process is not helpful. So what I'll say is
Okay.
let's play a little interactive game here. I'll leave it up to the viewers, and also you and I, Nate, we can maybe put some comments in the video in the future if we decide, oh yeah, it's pretty clear we should be cutting hydroelectric specimen for an island or whatever the new big thought
Sure.
that comes to
Sure.
mind. Or maybe we don't need 3 of these engine effects. We can get away with just playing the 2 cheaper ones or whatever. So please, if you've gotten to this point in the video and you're interested and you want to work on this deck with myself or with Nate, please jump into the comment section and give your input. What cards do you think aren't as impactful? What cards do you feel like we obviously overlooked? And, oh, don't you know about this synergy, blah, blah, blah. We're not as smart as you, obviously, so we need your help. So if you can, jump in there and add in some extra kind of input or maybe just yell at us about why the deck's bad, and I still think that's funny.
That's fine.
But I'll crowdsource this a little bit, just in the interest of time, and try to see kind of where other people think, and then I will make a promise that I'm going to actually put this deck back together and play it in one of my locals, and I'm so looking forward to the look on everyone's face when I get to Windmill Slam. I have an altered Geralf that's Skeletor going like like so
Oh heck yeah, dude! I
yeah.
love that.
Yeah, big shout out to the homie Green Knight, my friend Zach. He was able to find that for me. He's a solid dude here in the Tucson local scene. But cool. Okay, well, I really appreciate you coming on and just bouncing some ideas back and forth. Like I said, we just kept it informal and talked about the list a little bit, made a couple small tweaks, talked about the direction that we want to go a little bit more, and came up with some good ideas for the future, maybe about candelabra or expedition map. You were talking about manifold key, which I think is actually pretty interesting to bring back into the list or maybe alter the brood. So let's keep the brewing process going into the comments, and I'm curious to see what other people have to say. Anything else from you that you wanted to add, or any final thoughts?
Oh no, man! I'm really excited to see what people bring to this list. This list, if you have not, if this even sounds remotely interesting, I promise that you will love this list. It goes from 0 to 100 so fast. I think anyone who even has an inkling for making zombies, creature tokens, they love the bouncing synergies, and just please, for our sake, just try the list and you will not be disappointed. I promise. This is going to be so much fun. I love this stuff.
You're not wrong. I mean, when you were saying that, I had a big grin on my face ear to ear, and yeah, especially at words like bouncing synergies. So
Oh, it's so good. It's so good, man.
yeah,
It's so fun.
so much fun. Well, cool. Hey, thank you so much again. As a reminder, please go check out Turning Point Meta. We've got their all their information down below in the description. Keep an eye out for all the cool content that they've got on their channel as well. Thanks again, Nate, from the bottom of my heart for just jumping in and working on this with me real quick. And we'll see everybody out there in the tournament scene. Have a good one.
Later.